Today we are talking film photography. Hello, welcome back, Matt here again. Another question for you today. What is more important, the camera and the lens or the film? If you have X amount of money, do you spend it on the camera equipment or do you spend it on the film to go in the camera? I got the idea for this video because I shoot generally, hopefully quite nice cameras and lenses. As regular viewers know, you will know I enjoy using Leica M-mount film cameras. Could be Leica M2, Leica M3, Leica M4P, Leica M6. It could be all the M-mount lenses such as the Leica Similux 50mm 1.4 spherical. It could be the Leica Noctilux 50mm f1. It could be the Leica Macro Elmar 90mm f4. All this is expensive kit to shoot 35mm. And then talking 35mm, if I want to shoot panos, I've got the Hasselblad X-Pan, which is panoramic 35mm camera. Again, that's another expensive camera. And then what about medium format? You could use something like the Mamiya RZ67 Pro 2. You could use Hasselblad 500 cameras, Mamiya 7, Mamiya 6, or any other of the potentially more desirable medium format film cameras out there. And then you've also got large format. So large format cameras and lenses are probably less well known, but as you know, with large format, the film is very expensive, especially if you shoot color film. So the question is in this video, do you spend your money on nice cameras and lenses and then have no money left for film? Putting my hand up here as guilty as charged. I'm happy to spend my money on cameras and lenses because generally speaking, I try to buy cameras and lenses which hold their value. So worst case scenario, if I need to eat and buy some bread and water, I'll sell a camera and I won't lose too much money and hopefully maybe even make some money. So that's my argument for not owning a house or a TV and instead buying Leicas, for example. That's not the point of today's video. It's not supposed to be talking about me. I'm just trying to generalize and use me as a great example. And then I want you guys to write in the comments what's your take on this scenario. So my example of using Leica cameras and lenses, I've spent my money on my camera equipment, so then I try and save money on my film. So I tend to shoot films such as Fomapan 100, which is a budget black and white film, and I try to buy it in bulk and import it to get the cheapest possible price. And then I develop it myself in a really economical way of developing film. Patrons, you'll know because I've written posts on this already. And then I also scan my own film at home. So the developing part's really cheap. The scanning part is free once you've bought the scanner. So if you shoot enough, it's kind of probably recommended to buy your own scanner. And then I buy the cheapest film I can possibly buy where I'm happy enough to use the results. So that keeps my film cost, developing cost, scanning cost kind of as to the minimum, as small as possible. And then that allows me to have some money left over to buy the higher price cameras and lenses. My question is, have I got this completely wrong? Should I be spending less money on cameras and lenses and more money on premium film? And let me just stop and point out the obvious at this point. When it comes to film photography, the camera body doesn't matter in the slightest. As long as it allows you to mount the lens which will make the photos, that's all that's important. So if you want to use a very desirable Leica M-mount lens, let's just use the Leica Similux 50mm 1.4 spherical as a great example. If you want to use that lens, you don't need to put it onto a Leica M6. You don't need to put it onto any Leica camera at all. You could put it onto a cheaper Voigtlander Bessa M-mount camera, such as the, let's say, Voigtlander Bessa R3A. And I know before you say the price of the Voigtlander Bessa M cameras has also gone up drastically in the last few years. But just taking that as an example for M-mount. If we rule out M-mount for a second and look at, say, like a thread mount or like a screw mount cameras and lenses, this is more budget friendly. So you could pick up, say, a very sharp and capable Canon 50mm f1.8 LTM lens. So that's your sharp lens bit done, tick. And now you just need a camera to mount it on. You could use something like a Canon Model 7, a Canon P, rangefinder cameras. You could use the Voigtlander Bessa R camera, or you could use obviously like a 3 Barnett cameras. So you just need a cheap way to mount that affordable lens to be able to use it to shoot film. It doesn't matter if you mount that Canon 50mm 1.8 LTM lens on a Leica M6, note via an adapter because it's LTM mount into an M mount body, but I've covered this in many videos. What I'm saying is the camera body doesn't matter, as long as you can house your lens that you want to use and you pick a decent lens for the type of photography look that you want. You might want short fast lenses, you might want something like a sonar lens if you want the kind of the bokeh look. It obviously depends on the look that you want. So once you've picked the lens that you want and found a affordable camera to mount that lens onto, then you need to pick your film. So if I save money by, for example, using a Voigtlander Bessa instead of a Leica M6, that gives me quite a big chunk of money left over to now invest my money in premium film rather than budget film. So I could now use, for example, one of my favorites, Kodak T-Max 400 film, or I also like Ilford Delta 100, or it could be really extravagant and shoot Fuji Pro V100 slide film or Kodak Ektachrome 100 slide film. Slide film, in my experience, is probably as good as it gets in terms of resolution and kind of ultra fine grain, but you pay a premium for that film. So normally I don't shoot slide film and I spend my money on my cameras and lenses. But what people with a bigger brain than me might be doing is saving their money by buying cheaper cameras and then having the money left over to buy the premium film, such as the slide films we're talking about, or high-end black and white films, as I say, T-Max 100, Delta 100, Fuji A-Cross. All those types of films I rate as some of the best black and white films. So we've done our example of an expensive setup, as I say, Leica M6 plus Summilux and Fomapan 100 film, which is a real scenario which I'm guilty of using. It produces nice images, so no complaints there. Another great real example for me is I could be using something like a Nikon FM or Nikon FE2 camera, and then mount onto that Nikon something like the Voigtlander Nocturne 58mm 1.4 lens. This is an SL lens which I've covered in a previous video. The resolution and look of that lens is arguably very close to the expensive Leica Summilux lens. Without pixel peeping and all of that, basically the Voigtlander is a really strong lens for Nikon mount, and the Leica is obviously a nice lens for Leica M mount. If I buy the affordable Voigtlander 58 Nocturne and put it onto a very affordable Nikon F mount camera, I've now got a equally really nice optic compared to the Leica on a cheap body and have lots of money spare to buy nice film. So let's show another example with you. Here is a Leica M6 plus Leica Summilux 50mm 1.4 spherical with Fomapan 100 film, example 1. And then option 2, we have a Nikon FE2, I believe it was, the Voigtlander Nocturne 58 1.4, and some premium Kodak T-Max 400. So that's option 2. So option 1, expensive camera, expensive lens, cheap film. Option 2, cheaper camera, cheaper-ish lens and premium film. And then option 3, just for completeness, you could have a cheap camera. Again, we use something like the Nikon FM again as an example. We use a cheap lens. We use the Nikkor 55mm micro lens, which I covered in my recent sharpest 50mm Nikon lens video. And then again, we use Kodak T-Max 400 because that's a film stock that I've shot before. So in this example, I've picked a affordable lens, affordable camera, and again, premium film. And I'd like to argue that the cheap camera, cheap lens with premium film can give really, really strong results. So for just bringing back a second, this is potentially a video for myself where I feel I should be investing more of my money into film and less of my money into cameras and lenses. So maybe later in 2021, you might see less of my Fomapan images appearing on Flickr and perhaps more T-Max 400. I think this is especially important if you've got an important once-in-a-lifetime trip. Obviously, that topic is not even on the cards at the moment with lockdown. But for example, when I was lucky enough to go to San Francisco, it's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip, I decided to invest in Fuji Pro V100 slide film, and I was shooting that in the Fuji GF 670 camera to get the best kind of highest possible resolution images I could get from that camera for that once-in-a-lifetime trip. I was shooting the Hasselblad X-Pan to get kind of panos, again shooting slide film. And then I was also shooting, I think it was Ilford Delta 100 in the GF 670, as you can see in this example with the bridge in the background. I think for a trip like that, it's really important to invest in the film to get the best images you can. I think there's no point spending X amount of money on your flights and then a few pennies on some expired film that you picked up on eBay. I've got nothing against expired film. As you know, I shot a lot of Kodak BW 400 film, especially in 2020, and you can get really nice results from expired film. But this is more looking at premium film versus budget film. If you're a colour film photographer, this could be the difference between shooting Kodak Gold in your Leica M6 or shooting Kodak Portra 400 in your Nikon FM. If you put a decent lens on your Nikon FM I know I'm stating the obvious throughout this video, and don't shout to me, I'm just trying to almost drum it into my own thick brain, but hopefully it'll help perhaps some of you beginners at the same time. You can get better photos from your Nikon FM with a half decent lens, such as again the Pancake 58 1.8 lens. Stop that lens down a little bit, you're going to get really sharp, kind of nice contrast, good clarity images. Pair that up with Kodak Portra 400 or Kodak Portra 160. And again, I'd like to think you're going to get potentially nicer images than you get from a Leica M6 and a nice Leica M mount lens. Now again, don't shoot me down for these examples. Some people love the feel of a Leica camera. So then if the camera is important to you, you could potentially cheap out a bit on the lens and then again use premium film. Some people like using a Leica because it's a rangefinder. If you like using rangefinders and you can't afford a Leica, again, look at some of the alternative rangefinder cameras. So that's some examples for 35mm. What about if you shoot medium format? Medium format, great example could be something like you shoot with a Hasselblad 500 CM and obviously the nice Zeiss lenses which go with that camera system. Those cameras are not cheap and nor are the lenses. So there's a good chance you may need to then skimp and save money buying one of the cheaper films. Again, something like Fomapan 100 is a particular favourite of mine as a affordable but usable film. If you want a 6x6 negative and you don't want to spend the money on a Hasselblad, you could get something like the Voigtlander Perkio 6x6 vintage folding camera, which I've done a video on before. Those cameras at the time cost a fraction of the cost of the Hasselblad, let's say 10 times less, just for argument's sake. But just in this example, if you pick up a vintage folding 6x6 camera, which is known to have a good lens, stop the lens down slightly, put some premium film in that camera, you're going to be able to get super sharp images with premium film out of a affordable vintage folding film camera, or say TLR, 6x6 TLR camera. That could compare quite similarly to photos shot with a high-end medium format camera and cheap film. So again, this is a note to me to start putting nice film into my medium format cameras. And then lastly, my third example is slightly different. Sometimes I want to buy a camera to shoot every type of format. So for example, I might have a 6x7, let's say Mamiya 7, but I want to shoot 6x6. I could spend another, how much are they, £2,000 to £3,000 on a Mamiya 6, so I could shoot 6x6 in my Mamiya 6 and shoot 6x7 in my Mamiya 7. Sounds obvious, right? Equally, if you're a Mamiya RZ67 shooter, you may buy the RZ or RB to shoot 6x7, but then one day you might wake up and say, oh, I'd love to start shooting 6x6. If you like I was in the past, you just go out and look for a 6x6 camera. For example, a Hasselblad is an obvious example if you like that type of camera. But a much cheaper option is just to buy a 6x6 back for your existing camera. If you're lucky enough to use something like a Mamiya RZ, where you could get 6x6 backs, I use a 6x6 back on my Mamiya RZ. Or if you're using something like the Mamiya 7 that doesn't have an interchangeable back, you could just crop it in post. Now this is kind of against my nature. I like to compose in camera, but if I want to save myself £2,000 to £3,000 by not having to go out and buy a Mamiya 6, for example, think how much film I could have bought with that value of money and just kept one camera and just been less stubborn and cropped my 6x7 to 6x6 in camera. Another great example of this is my Voigtlander Perkio 1 and Perkio 2 cameras. These are 6x6 folding cameras and they are really small and really portable and just amazing for anybody that likes small cameras. As soon as I bought that camera, I was like, amazing. And then I was like, oh, but it'd be so nice to have something similar that shot 645. So then I went out looking to potentially purchase similar folding cameras, which was 645 format. And then when I sat back for a second and actually thought for a moment, I'm like, the Perkio 6x6 is already the perfect camera form-wise in terms of the shape of the camera. So why don't I just crop my 6x6 to a 645 after taking the photos and then save multiple hundreds of pounds by not buying an additional 645 camera, something like the Fuji GA 645 or the Fuji GS 645. Both very nice cameras, but I potentially didn't need to buy those cameras and I could have saved my money and bought more high-end kind of premium film for the cameras that I already had. Final example, again, you've got something like a Mamiya 7 and then you see someone post a video on a Hasselblad, naming no names, and you think, oh, it'd be so nice to shoot panos. Rather than go out and have to spend £3,000 on a Hasselblad X-Pan, you could instead just buy a 35mm adapter kit for your Mamiya 7. Now you can shoot Hasselblad style panos in your existing camera and only spend, I think it's £300, something like that, on a 35mm adapter kit for your existing camera rather than have to spend £3,000, so 10 times less. It's worth noting you can get 35mm adapt kits for quite a few cameras if you do your research. I've got a 35mm adapt kit for my Rolleicord, and I've seen 35mm adapt kits for my Mamiya 6, although I haven't actually bought one. So I guess those are just some ways in saving money on your cameras and lenses to then allow you to have some money left over to spend more money on your film stocks. If you can relate to anything in this video, please let me know in the comments, and hopefully I'm not the only one here. As I say, I put my hands up, I spend my money on equipment, and I try to save as much money as possible on my film. As I'm very, very slowly starting to mature mentally, I feel the time is now getting to the point where I should value the photos that I'm taking more, especially in certain situations, as I say, a special trip or a particular model in my example as a portrait photographer, and spend the money to buy the film to make even more amazing images with my existing cameras. It obviously depends on your taste, but I think sometimes putting budget film into a premium camera is kind of buying a sports car or sports bike and then having it kind of regulated, where it can do, 200 miles an hour, but they change the engine so it can only do 100 miles an hour. If you're buying expensive cameras and expensive lenses, you could argue you should at least treat them to some expensive film to get the absolutely maximum best possible resolution or detail out of that equipment that you can possibly get. There is, of course, counter arguments for everything I've just said. If, for example, you shoot portraits, I've personally found that if I shoot Kodak T-Max 400 with a sharp lens on a nice camera body, it can be too sharp for the females' faces to take, even shot at 1.4 on, say, the Summilux that we used as an earlier example. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. You might be able to relate to it in some parts, but at the same time, sometimes it's better to shoot expired film or budget film because that's just the look that you like. You may prefer shooting budget Kodak Gold film because it gives a warmer look, and you've got no interest in shooting, say, premium Kodak Portra 400, for example. But I just thought I'd take myself as an example where my balance is slightly swung like this to cameras and lenses, and I feel it needs to be bringing it back something towards a bit more towards the film aspect. Especially with the price of film going up and up, I need to kind of bite the bullet and invest in the art, as they call it, and spend the money on the film regardless of the price going up, support the kind of the industry and keep them making film, because that's what's the most important thing, I think. If you found anything of what I just said useful, please hit the like button. I really appreciate it. And as I say, let me know in the comments if you've got any thoughts, whether you're for or against good kit versus good film. Which way are you on the needle? If you're new to the channel, this isn't my typical type of video. I normally do camera and lens reviews, but occasionally I try and add in a few different things just to keep it a bit more varied. Feel free to subscribe if you like this type of content, and as always, a massive thanks to my patrons. Thanks for watching, and see you again in a few days. Bye.